Funny. So John mentioned Heidegger,
Hmm.
and I'm really interested, really quite interested in that.
Mm.
I don't know why my mind jumped to it so quickly, but it's clearly chomping at the bit. So perhaps it is a good idea to run with it.
Mm.
Though I have no particular attachment to following that path at any pace. Perhaps it's better to slow down.
Yeah, totally. Couple things like, yeah, Heidegger's a whole world. Like it's a whole world that's I'm it's a world that's there's something that Heidegger I think was haunted him that revealed a level of thinking, or you could say the movement of intelligibility, right? That I started to read for reasons I don't quite understand at the same time that circling was emerging. Because my background is I don't have, like, I'm not academic. Yeah. What, just really quick, that, could you say that another way?
Yeah, or at all.
I don't know if I could paraphrase that completely.
That was the dropping in of the realization of what it would mean to be dealing with Heidegger in the context of a group of people in a process that actually could enable that group to have a collective capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting, and this is what's telling about, I think, revealing about the world, like what Heidegger was doing, is I didn't realize the connection between the two until like 2 or 3 years later, where, because I didn't quite understand why I was reading Heidegger, because I didn't really understand him. I mean, I'm dyslexic, and I couldn't learn how to read until I was like 11, and took a heroic teacher to kind of do that for me. And so my reading comprehension is not like the best. So I didn't quite understand why I was reading the hardest philosopher in like known to man. But there was something about what he was saying about being that that it was like to attempt to understand him. What I realized was to try to understand him. And this is similar to my experience of actually being mentored or being with a teacher, that there's this quality of as Rilke would, or as no, as Vervaeke would say, of participatory, right? Participation, in which, like with the mentor, when my grandfather, who was a tailor, who was mentored for 2 years as he lived in a park in Hanover, Germany, when he would talk about stories about dwelling with his mentor, there was this dwelling quality where much of the learning wasn't so much about what the tailor said about tailoring. It was sitting next to him for hours at a time, right? Eating lunch with him, all of the sensibility and the history of tailorhood and his way of being that you kind of dwell in. And then you kind of come out, in some sense, mentored fully through that, right? You kind of carry that way of being, right? So I would imagine it's similar to that experience of when you go to another country and you come back home and people tell you you have an accent. It's very much like that. Like for me, there's like what Heidegger says and understanding what he says. And when people summarize Heidegger, there's positions and stuff he takes, but that's not really Heidegger. Heidegger is taking you on this walk of thinking, right? And the point is mostly it's the experience of understanding that is the thing I was most left with. Because though I would, like, you read Heidegger, so you're like trying to, like, in order to kind of understand what he's saying, you have to step so outside of your frame of reference, right? To then look back and then kind of get it and then start all over again, right? And
Yeah.
And I would just do that for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then I go and circle. And then I'd do that and I'd circle and I'd do that and I'd circle and I'd do that and I'd circle. I was back and forth. And then one day somebody said something that had this vernacular that was just the accent of circling. And I'm like, oh shit. All of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, very funny, grandfather Heidegger. Oh, I see this. what I realized is he taught me actually how to see. He taught me he taught me that there's, like, you could say, the phenomenological sense is this awareness of that concealment is, and that which is most concealed is that which is most near, and that kind of looking of getting that sense of a horizon or a telos, and also the background and the foreground, and just having this sense of just following that back, that kind of closer and closer and closer in, which is, I would say, encircling, started to cultivate this deep sense of wonder, right? About what I think the way that Vervaeke talks about is this transframing, this primordial ground, which when you realize it, there's this kind of primordial sense of wonderment that comes up, that is also the very experience of when you participate with each other in that sense of wonderment. It seems to produce the kind of experiences that people call wonder and love and affinity and unreasonable devotion and all of that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm not sure if one thing that was running through my way of making sense of what I was perceiving, whew, was the sense or the feeling of like a space-time. Okay, I can say it this way. I had an insight a long time ago where I realized that if you take a look at a lightning bolt, and from the perspective of a person looking at a lightning bolt, it looks jaggedy. But from the perspective of the lightning bolt, it's a perfectly straight line. Because we're looking at it from what you might call a neutral third-person perspective through space.
Mm-hmm.
It's perceiving the galvanic potential.
Mm-hmm.
So it's proceeding along the gradient of galvanic potential, and is simply following the straightest path through the gradient of galvanic potential.
Yeah.
So from its perspective, it's traversing a straight line.
Yeah.
And then I was imagining the notion of a circle, circling, but a circle. And the circle has from again, objective third-person space-time perspective, I can say that you're in a circle when there are a group of people oriented, I would imagine, in a all facing inward geometrically, all the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then I was having this flash of, for example, when I was reading Manuel de Landa, actually that book right there, and how it connected with a conversation that I had been having in my head, of course, with Gilles Deleuze. And there was a flash of insight as the two connected. And I had this feeling of it being as if we were in a circle, but mediated through a phenomenology that has a different frame of reference.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Can you say more about the frame of reference?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, if we just zoom in on the conversation we're having right now.
Yeah.
And I can feel myself getting lost. So if I get lost, please bring me back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What we can notice is that there's a very fun objective illusion that we're having a conversation with each other. In some sense, this is as if we were face to face, separated by a couple of feet.
Yeah.
And yet, of course, if I notice what's happening in reality, it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, it's quite likely that the sound waves that are being projected into my microphone electrically and converted into digital signals inside my laptop, packeted up in TCP/IP packets, and then spewed across the internet through the protocol that may in fact be jumping through satellites into space and back down, which then are emerged, converted into analog signals in your laptop. The medium that enables that creates so think about that like the lightning bolt. There's a objective perspective on our point of view that collapses that entire complexity of the underlying reality of what packet space would perceive as a hell of a job into something that is isomorphic to a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I can run that same projection here and simulate a face-to-face conversation using a medium, a variety of different media constructs, I could do the inverse. And I could say, oh, well, it looks like the medium of capitalism producing books and shipping them to me via Amazon and projecting text into my eyeball that was glued to paper, I mimetically copying the text that was actually scripted by, in this case, Deleuze and Delande over a different time frame, same exact thing in reverse. And so in point of fact, I am actually in a circle with them, but that circle is propagating through reality in a different kind of way. And if we can actually grok the consequences of the media on the way that the consciousness is actually able to form itself as a coherent singularity, then we're doing something interesting. Hey, I don't think I got lost. I pulled it off. Oh, neat.
You really did pull it off. Yeah, totally.